The title of this episode is purposeful because we are talking about the instinctual emotional responses that play into purchase decisions that happen because of marketing. My guest, Nancy Harhut, has written a book out this month called Using Behavioral Science in Marketing, and we talk about the hacks, the techniques, and the tactics used to improve marketing performance. There are probably a dozen anecdotes and stories shared in this episode that you can use in marketing copy, landing page design, and more, whether you're in B2B or B2C, and whether you're doing a win-back campaign or a brand new acquisition campaign. This one is really fun. Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm well, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Not as great as you. You're dialing in from Cape Cod today, which I'm very jealous about. We were talking about off air before hopping on here. Nancy, the book that you're releasing is really, really interesting, and I want to talk about that today. Let me start here. As humans, we're programmed to have certain types of responses. The one that comes to mind most often is like fight or flight. A lot of your work in your career and your upcoming book explore how human behaviors and instincts inform the success of marketing as much as anything else. When you look back earlier in your career, what insights did you have that inspired you to investigate this and figure it out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of what humans do, a lot of our behavior is uh, subconscious or instinctive or innate, and it goes back to, like you said, fight or flight or eat or be eaten, friend or foe. Back when our ancient ancestors roamed the world, they had to make decisions quickly. If two of them were strolling along and they saw a saber-toothed tiger and one of them was like, "Ooh, looks kind of furry. Ooh, but the teeth look kind of sharp. I wonder," boom, that one is lunch, right? If the other one kind of looked at it and said, turned around, ran back to the cave, that was the one who survived to see the sun the next morning. Those were the genes that get passed down. And, for a while, those were really important genes because they were really helping people stay alive. These days, uh, they're still part of our DNA, but they kind of help us get through the day, basically. Humans are hardwired to conserve mental energy. And so these automatic, instinctive, reflexive behaviors that we have basically help us do just that. And it's interesting, you asked, how did I get into this? So when I was a young copywriter, I was working at an agency called Bronner Sosberg Humphrey, which is today's Digitas. And one of the things that we focused on there was uh, barriers and levers. What's the barrier to someone doing what we want them to do, and then what's the lever that would overcome it? And that, I think, really informed a lot of my thinking. And I started to dive deeper and deeper into that. When I would, I'm a copywriter by trade. When I would write something, I would always be thinking about who was going to read it and what was their mindset, what would they be kind of bringing to the table when I was saying, hey, switch to this phone company, buy this computer, sign up for this insurance. Like what might be in their head, and what would be the best way to kind of get them onto my side. um, so that's kind of really where I started. Ultimately, I ended up being introduced to the work of Robert Cialdini. I think I want to say one of my creative directors and mentors, Alan Rosenspan, introduced me to his book, but I'm not positive. But Cialdini wrote "Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion," and then I just went down the rabbit hole and I started to read Nudge by Castine and by I'm sorry, Thaler and Sunstein, and Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, and I just started to dive deeper and deeper into behavioral science and social science and cognitive behavior. And I began to, I'd be scribbling margin notes and think like, how could I use this for my clients? I began to test some of these things with my clients, and they started to work. And then you can say the rest is history. But I came from a direct marketing background, which was always about results and getting people to make decisions. And when you think about behavioral science, it's the study of how people make decisions. So it's a perfect match. And I think that's how I got there. And I'm just loving it, and my clients are loving the results. So it's a good thing.
That's awesome, and I like how you said that kind of how we make decisions. And I was trying to visualize in advance of this conversation like a pie chart where the different pieces of the pie are ways that I might make a purchase decision. There are ones that I might call like logical or rational. There are two things, which one's less expensive? That would seem like more of rational thing to me. And then certain emotional things like how do I feel when I'm involved with a company or involved with a marketing campaign or what I think about a brand. Like those are emotional things. Am I breaking this down correctly? And if not, how should marketers think about the question? And I'm just piling on with all kinds of questions here. And then how big are these pieces of the pie?
So I think you got the two pieces right, John. I think in terms of a broad brushstroke, those are the two areas. And I would say from the research I've done, anywhere between 80 and 95% of decision making is emotional or instinctive or innate or happens in the subconscious mind. And the balance of it is more the rational kind, the kind that you kind of put your thinking cap on for. You weigh the pros and cons, you list out the cost benefits, and you really engage with the material in front of you. But a lot of what we do, as I said earlier, we're trying to conserve mental energy. A lot of what we do is just on autopilot. We're cruising along on autopilot. We encounter a certain situation and we default to these hardwired behaviors. And what behavioral scientists have found is, for the most part, people make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they later justify those decisions to themselves, to the people that they're talking to, with rational reasons. So, from a marketing perspective, we want to have both emotional and rational sales points in our communications because both of them are going to be important. But very often, it's the emotional response that kind of seals the deal, and then rationally we justify it.
That's funny how we justify rationally. I mean, I can imagine that emotion plays a really big factor in certain types of decisions. Like it comes naturally to me, like buying a car, and I might look at all these different cars, but gosh darn it, I really want this one brand, and that's the brand I'm gonna get. And then because I like how it looks, or I like how I imagine myself in it. And then I'm talking to a friend, they ask me why I bought it, and I'm like, oh, it's so practical. It's the whatever. That makes a lot of sense. In your book, you talk a lot, almost like you're trying to convince the audience, like this really works for B2B too. And I want to ask you about that. Like where does behavioral science apply? Like if I'm the head of IT and I'm deciding between Google, Amazon, and Microsoft for cloud services, like where does behavioral science play into a decision like that?
Sure, that's a really good question, John. And I think you're right. I think, well, first of all, let's take a step back. As marketers, we often believe that if we can just put the right information in front of people, you get the right message to the right person at the right time, they'll make the right decision. And then, people come along and say, well, actually, that's not the way it works. People aren't as rational as marketers might think they are. There's this whole thing about behavioral science and people responding emotionally or instinctively, and that's a little bit eye-opening for a marketer. But then they're like, well, okay, I get it if you're buying a car, I get it if you're buying a beer, things like that. But certainly not for my B2B audience, certainly not for my highly educated professional environment audience. But the truth is, people are people, whether they're at home or at work, and we make decisions for emotional reasons, and we justify them with the rational reasons. We make a decision in a work environment not solely because it's right for the company. Certainly, that's part of it, but that's not the only thing at play. Very often, whether we're aware of it or not, we're also thinking about what's in this for me. Am I going to be able to do my job easier? Am I going to be able to leave at 5 o'clock and get home to my family? Is the boss going to think it's a good idea? Is the board going to think it's a good idea? Am I going to look good to my peers? Or is this going to be a real difficult thing for me to get through the organization? Are people going to dislike me because I chose this service or I implemented this practice? So there's a human element here. People are absolutely thinking about, how it's going to affect them as well as, how it's going to affect the organization as a whole. One good example is I did some work for a company called Cognos. They make business intelligence software, and essentially, what that will do is it will kind of like take data in distinct uh, databases and bubble it up so that you get a complete 360 view of the information. And they could have done ads that said, "This is what we do," right, and just explained it. They could have taken it a step further and said, "Well, this is what we do. we help you see, we help you unlock data from the different databases because, if you don't have all the data and you make a decision that's, that has incomplete data, it could have a ripple effect, kind of like the butterfly effect. And way down the road, there'll be unintended consequences. That could have worked. But the winning campaign, which actually ended up increasing purchase intent by 13%, talked about how you, the user, feel. And it basically, positioned the product as the antacid for a diet of tough decisions. And it basically said, look, you've got to make all these decisions, and people's lives depend on their livelihoods depend on them. It's not just your job on the line. It could be the job of your employees. It could be the reputation of your company. It could be, there could be legal and regulatory ramifications. If you make the wrong decision, if you make a decision without complete data, and you don't have the complete data, so it's only a matter of time before you're going to be making a decision without it, and that decision is going to go south, that's going to be a problem. And that's the kind of thing that keeps people up at night. It's the kind of thing that, gives them agita. And that was the campaign that we went out with. So here you've got business intelligence software, a very practical, rational product, and yet it was being sold with a very emotional angle, which is not to say that they didn't then explain, here's what the product does, and here are some good sales points, but they led with the emotion. Emotion really works, and it's, again, it's not just for that new sports car or that, ice cold frosty beer. It's for B2B products, practical products, even boring products.
That's a really good point, and the motivation of the buyer, I think, is essential to this because there's a huge part of any buyer's calculation that's going to be how am I helping the company, but also am I going to get promoted? How much personal risk am I taking? Has my boss heard of this thing that I'm recommending, and what is his or her perception of that? Those things are really, really important. It strikes me as you're talking about marketing messages, a lot of the best B2B sales people that I've worked with do a lot of those things, understand the emotion and intent of the buyer, and try to craft a solution that addresses that above and beyond the products and features, et cetera.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the old adage, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM, right? For choosing IBM, buying IBM. Again, it's like safety. It's like, look, I don't want to look bad to the boss. I don't want to put my job on the line. Even more recently, I think just at the end of last year, I think it was year or the middle of last year, Spotify came out with a campaign targeting CMOs. And what they did is they created an individual custom song for this list of CMOs that they were, people on the list were people they were doing business with as well as people they wanted to do business with. So think about the impact that has. I mean, it's a custom made song for me. It's certainly going to, impact how you feel about Spotify. It's going to, get you to engage, with the company a little bit more, investigate it a little bit more. So there definitely are times when, very emotional sales points are going to work even in a B2B environment. It is, as you said, it's all about how that individual decision maker is feeling.
Yeah, and in that case, it feels to me like a CMO that Spotify will customize something for me and my unique needs just by virtue of the advertising campaign, even though they didn't come out and say it. That's really interesting. Spotify, you should have targeted me for that one. Uh, so
John, I understand that, at least when I was reading about it, they're saying if there are other CMOs out there that want to be considered, please get in touch. So here's your
Okay.
opportunity.
All right. All right. I'll do that. So I want to dive into some of the tactics, or I don't know if it's tactics or concepts introduced in the book. I'll start off with one. So it probably makes sense to most marketers that having pictures or imagery or photography is a good thing to include in campaigns or landing pages. What the heck is a mirror neuron, which is mentioned in the book, and how does that inform how a marketer might think about selecting photography or imagery?
Sure. So mirror neuron is an interesting phrase because you kind of get mirror and then you get neuron. And you're like, whoa, we're descending into science. Where is this going? But it's actually very simple. What scientists have found is that the human brain isn't really good at distinguishing the difference between when we do something and when we watch someone else do it. So think about like sports coaches, and they're like envision the perfect tennis serve, or envision the perfect golf swing. When we see somebody do something, we respond as if we ourselves are doing it, like all the neurons fire as if we're doing that action ourselves. And there was a researcher named Giacomo Rizzolatti in Italy, and he was doing some research, and he was using these monkeys, and the monkeys were kind of all set up with the electrodes and all. And the researchers decided to take a break, and the monkeys are just sitting there, and they still have their electrodes attached to their skulls. And one of the researchers comes back in eating an ice cream cone, and all of a sudden the monkey, starts reacting brainwave wise as if he or it, itself was eating the ice cream cone. And they're like, oh my God, he's watching the researcher, but his brain is firing as if the monkey itself is eating it. And then subsequent research found out that this isn't just monkeys that respond this way, humans do as well. So what does that mean to us as marketers? It means that we want to show people enjoying our products and services, right? Show them using them, and show them smiling and happy and pleased. Because when people see that, that kind of, they'll mirror that, right? It will transfer to them, and they'll start to have those same feelings. Their neurons will fire in the same way as if they themselves were enjoying the product, as if they themselves were getting the satisfaction that the product offers. And then, just as an aside, sometimes we're like, you know, I'm going to do a before and after shot. That'll be a good thing to do. I'll show kind of, this is the way your current situation is, and here's how it could be with our product or service. And what researchers have found is the closer those two photos or images are to each other, the better off you are, because the closer they are, the greater the relationship people imply. So if you're going to show a before and after, or if you're going to show a cause and effect, I don't know, acne and pimple cream or something, you want those two pictures to be as close together as possible. So you don't necessarily want to have one on the left hand margin of a double page ad, and the other on the right hand margin, or on the top of a web page and the bottom of a web page. You want them as close together as possible. So just kind of just as an aside related to mirror neurons and choosing imagery.
That's really interesting. And what I like about this example, and then also the other things you talk about in the book, is they're almost like hacks for marketers, because we in our brains, we can't control our reaction to it, provided that you've selected the image or the photo that does what you're hoping the audience does. I guess I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I want to turn to another concept, which is loss aversion. Would you mind explaining this, how it plays into marketing, and maybe like which industries or scenarios it's most important for?
Yeah, so loss aversion is really interesting, and it's almost a little counterintuitive. So what behavioral scientists have found is people are actually twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. So we're twice as motivated to avoid loss as we are to achieve gain. But in marketing, what do we emphasize, right? We always emphasize the gains, the advantages, the benefits, all the wonderful things that are going to happen if you just do what I'm asking you to do, if you just, buy my product, if you just sign up for my service. And of course, we know as marketers that benefits work. I'm not telling, your audience that they shouldn't be emphasizing benefits, but a little well-placed loss aversion can go a long way, because again, people are twice as motivated to avoid that pain of loss. So a simple example would be, maybe you're writing a headline or a subject line, and instead of saying take advantage of, you say don't miss, right? It almost ties into FOMO, don't, fear of missing out, don't miss out. But so often I'll be writing copy for clients, and they'll be like, oh, that sounds good, but let's make it a little bit more positive. And the truth is, it shouldn't always be positive, because people are more motivated, to avoid mistakes, to avoid losses. And that's what loss aversion is all about. I did an email campaign for a company that was trying to convince employees to sign up for a 401k program, a retirement program. And we tested a few different things. We tested the idea of social proof, hey, a lot of other people like you are doing this, therefore you should too. We tested the idea of scarcity. Here are some, little known secrets. Not everyone knows these, but these are great secrets in terms of trying to, accumulate a retirement nest egg. And then we tested the idea of loss aversion. We asked people, are you making these mistakes with your retirement money? And while all of them performed well, the thing that performed the best was actually this idea of loss aversion. People do not want to make mistakes. They don't want to miss opportunities. They don't want to have missteps. So actually, injecting a little bit of loss aversion into marketing messages can be a very good thing. It's deadlines, it's expiration dates, it's things like, this opportunity may not circle back around. You may not get this email again. We want to let you know that we just recently restocked this. It's like, oh wow, if they just recently restocked it, it means that it's sold out. I better get it now before it sells out again. There are lots of ways that we can actually trigger or harness this hack, if you will, of loss aversion. And as you said, people, they can't control how their mind works. And when we realize that we might lose out on something, that we might miss out on something, we're just compelled to take advantage of it, to get off the dime and act now. And that's why loss aversion can be such an important tool for us as marketers.
I can imagine performance marketers, direct response marketers. This is gold for everyone who has to get someone, or they're incentivized to get someone to do something right now. Is there a fine line where you can go too far with that type of loss aversion and create a negative feeling from the person that's going to make potentially? I can imagine. I mean, I don't know why I'm going back to cars, but almost like going into having a weird sales experience in person where you feel pressured to do something right now. So where's too far, and how do you balance that as a marketer?
Yeah, I mean that you bring up a really important point, because we're talking about behavioral science. We're talking about the fact that people cruise along on autopilot and they make certain decisions without really thinking. And you talked about, you even used the term hack, which I myself have used. It's just like ways to hack the human brain. Um, and so what I always say to people is we want to use this responsibly. If we start to use some of these techniques irresponsibly, if we start to really kind of abuse them, like saying this is your last opportunity to get something, and it turns out there's a whole stock room of those things, or if we say it's a today only sale, and then tomorrow we say the same thing, and then the next day we say the same thing, that really erodes trust. And you might have a short term win, but ultimately it's going to blow back on you, and that's just not a good thing to do. So, what we want to do is we want to make it easy for people to do what they actually want to do. So we want to help them. So we want to properly target them with a reputable product from a reputable company, and we want to make it easy for them to make the right decision. But we don't want to abuse these tactics. We don't want to make people feel browbeaten. We don't want to make people feel that they're being forced into doing something. We just want to acknowledge the fact that people are cruising along on autopilot. They're juggling all these different decisions they have to make. Their attention is scattered. They're time starved, and as a result, anything we can do to make it easier for them to choose to make a good decision for themselves is a win-win for both of us. And I think that's the way marketers need to look at these tactics and these techniques.
It's like respectfully suggesting that there's scarcity of some kind, whether it's time or whether it's the amount of product. You talk about scarcity in the book. I actually want to shift gears though a little bit. A lot of what we do as marketers is trying to attract brand new people to come into our service, our product, our ecosystem. But as I increasingly work with clients, I find that re-engagement or win back is a really huge part of what marketing teams do, or maybe even called customer retention teams or win back teams. What is the concept of reciprocity, which you talk about in the book, and how do you use that to either improve loyalty, get your loyal customers to buy more, or do win back or other types of goals?
Yeah. So reciprocity is a very interesting concept, and it kind of speaks to how people are, like how basically civil we are. So another term for reciprocity would be this idea of give to get. But basically, what behavioral scientists have found is if you do something for someone, they feel obliged to return the favor. They feel obliged to answer in kind. So if you give someone something, if you do something for them, whether or not they even asked for it, but once you give them something, once you do something for them, they kind of feel like, all right, I now owe this person, and I want to even the score, right? And sometimes they'll even the score right away, and other times it will take a while, but they eventually want to do it. So there was a researcher named Philip Kuntz, and he ran this interesting experiment. He grabbed a Chicago phone book back when people used phone books, right? He was a professor at Brigham Young University. He grabbed a phone book and he just chose random strangers out of the phone book, and he sent these random strangers Christmas cards. And then he just watched to see what was going to happen. And over 20% of the people sent him cards back. So imagine, you're home, you get this card, and you're like, honey, do we know the Philip Kuntz family? No, I don't know. Well, he sent us card, and you pull out your box of cards, dear Phil and family, hope all is well, happiest of holidays, love the Harhuts, and boom, off you send it off. It's like they sent me a card, I should send them a card. Like that's how we respond. If you go out for a business lunch and someone picks up the tab, you think, all right, next time we go out, I've got to pick up the tab. We like to answer in kind what people do for us. So I was working with Nationwide. This is a great example. I was working with Nationwide Financial, and they wanted to re-engage financial advisors who had previously sold Nationwide products, but had stopped selling them for a year or more. So they've stopped for a year or more, and Nationwide said, "Oh, we really want to re-engage them." And she's like, "Oh, that's going to be a tough order. I mean, they used to sell the product, so there's not, we can't really pitch them as if they're brand new because they are familiar with the company, they are familiar with the products, they've experienced it, so what are we going to say?" And we're like, "All right, we're going to rely on reciprocity." We just try to re-engage them, and we sent them an email that said, "Hey, we've picked out a gift especially for you, picked out this gift especially for you. Watch your US mail, and it's going to be arriving soon." And then a box arrives in the mail, and inside the box is a framed New Yorker cartoon. And the caption of the cartoon actually includes the name of the financial advisor. So it was this great cartoon. It had something to do with, selling financial services. There's your name in the caption. It's already framed. What are you, you're going to put it on your wall immediately. It's like so great, right? And then there was a little note and some information, about the funds, and a note that said, "Hey, please give your wholesaler a call." Not only did people re-engage, Nationwide reported that they sold an incremental $68 million of business because of this campaign. So, again, it's like I was a financial advisor. I used to sell the product. I had stopped selling it for whatever reason. I get this cool gift, and what do? I think, oh my God, I should do some business with them again, right? That's how humans are hardwired. We're civil. We're nice. This is what allowed us to evolve. If you think about it, right? We had to be cooperative. We had to work with each other. So the reciprocity principle can be very, very powerful. And it doesn't have to be sending out, framed cartoons, but making things available, whether it's content or how-to videos or a free trial or a free sample, but just, being the first one to give sets you up for being able to get a return from that gift.
And that example is so amazing. I encourage all the B2B marketers who have their swag budget for pens at a conference and take that money and try to come up with something like this. It's very, very clear if you're the recipient of the package, even if you're disinclined to move forward with Nationwide. In that case, it's clear that Nationwide tried to think about you in a really, really, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is mature, but like in a really thoughtful and personal way. And that has got to create some capital. That's a really, really cool story. Um, okay, so I want to talk about put ourselves in the shoes of a marketing manager. They're responsible, let's say, for the landing page of a digital campaign, trying to sell someone some complex product like a financial service, which you just mentioned. What's the playbook for getting started on how to learn and improve? And maybe reworded, how would you recommend that a marketing organization or an individual starts to adopt a behavioral science mindset?
So I guess it's almost like a two-part question. The shorter or more specific part is, what do I put on the landing page that would be informed by behavioral science? And maybe the larger, more broad question is, how do I start to incorporate this? So I think we'll start with the smaller one first. So if you're creating a landing page, I'd say there are probably three behavioral science principles that you really want to focus on. The first one would be something called cognitive fluency. And cognitive fluency is kind of a mouthful of a phrase that basically means that people prefer things that are easier to think about and and easier to understand. So cognitive fluency isn't particularly easy to understand. The behavioral scientists should have called it the easy to understand principle, in my opinion, right? But cognitive fluency, it's again, people prefer things that are easier to think about and easier to understand. So when you're creating your landing page, you want to make sure that the information that you put on it is easy for people to grasp. You don't hit them with like a wall of copy, deep, thick paragraphs. You want to make sure that the headline immediately reassures them that they've landed in the right place. Something drove them to that landing page. They want to see a connection between the impetus and where they landed, so that they feel like, okay, I'm in the right place. They don't want to be hit with a wall of copy, but maybe some quick bullets, or, a couple of sentences. So they want to be able to quickly skim and scan, and be reassured that they're in the right place, they're making the right decision. And then that leads us to our second of the three things I would recommend, and that is using some social proof. Behavioral scientists have found that when people are uncertain of what to do, they look to others, particularly others like themselves, and they follow their lead. So maybe indicating how many other people have already made this decision, maybe including a customer testimonial. Testimonials are great because people can be skeptical of what the marketer says, but they're much more willing to believe, pardon me, they're much more willing to believe what another customer says. So they're maybe skeptical of what the marketer says, but if another customer says something, they think, oh, that customer is like me. So, I feel more, reassured that this is a good move. And just as an aside on testimonials, if you can find one that starts with a certain amount of skepticism and then ends in a good place, so much the better. If someone says, I used to think, all of these providers were the same, but then I tried this one. Oh my gosh, so much better than the others. The person reading that is going to say, yes, I used to think, and that is what I think, that they're all the same, but apparently they're not. This guy figured it out. I can learn on his dime. So we've got some cognitive fluency, we've got some social proof. And then I think the last thing you want on your uh, landing page from a behavioral science perspective, not the last thing, the final thing, would be a little bit of the authority principle, because uh, since we're children, we've been taught to recognize and respect authority. So if an authority says something, we usually believe it. If an authority tells us to do something, we often do it. So if you can have, you know, uh, an industry icon endorsing your product or service, if you're a member of the Better Business Bureau, if you're a member of the Association of National Advertisers, if you're a member of the American Dental Association, whatever it is, something that has that kind of authority. If you've been endorsed by Moody's or AM Best, you have that, and people feel really sure. They feel, okay, this is going to be a good move for me. And then, of course, the broader question is, so how do you even, how do you start to integrate behavioral science into your marketing campaigns, your marketing messages? And, there I would say, start to read some of the books, attend some of the conferences, hire an agency that's well versed in it, that's got the experience. But it's a matter of, I think, learning what some of these behavioral science principles are. And honestly, there are hundreds that behavioral scientists have identified that trigger these automatic responses. But learning, what they are, and then beginning to test and experiment, because you're going to find that sometimes one will work better than another given a particular audience or particular marketing challenge. And so you want to start to test your way into these, uh, these messages, these behavioral science informed messages, and start to track your results. And you're going to start to see uplifts in terms of engagement and response, and you're going to start to see which ones perform better for you than the others.
And I like also, as you're a landing page practitioner doing experiments, is attaching a behavioral science principle, having a reason why you're doing the experiment. I think is really really important as part of that. Now I want to. I love eating at restaurants, and one of the things that bugs me if I go to a restaurant and there are 75 or 100 things on the menu. On the other hand, if I go to a restaurant, they only do one thing. I better like that thing a lot. So this is, I don't know if this is a good segue, but a lot of us in B2B, or whether I'll go back to the car situation again, how many options should I be providing consumers when buying my car? There's a base, there was a premium, there's a super premium package. For internet, there was fast, and super duper fast. For some companies, there are add-on features. How should I think as a marketer? What should be some rules of thumb around how many options I should be providing buyers at certain stages?
Sure. So what I usually recommend to clients is somewhere between three and five options, and there's a reason for this. If you go beyond five, choice overload can kind of set in. People are going to have a hard time, analysis paralysis, right? There's all these choices. Oh, I'm loving all my choices, but I can't quite land any place. Um, But you'd say, well, all right, then eliminate the choices. Just tell them what they should get, but having only one option is also not good because what happens? You put one option in front of somebody and they're like, oh, okay, there's nothing to compare it to. There's no context. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to do a little research. Maybe I'll talk to people. And while your prospect's intentions are good, other things interfere and they just don't get around to doing it. They don't come back to the decision. So if you have one item, one option, it's like, all right, no context. Too many, then it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what decision to make. And even if I make one, scientific research shows that very often you're unhappy because you keep thinking, did I make the right one? Maybe I should have gotten that other one. There are just too many variables. So between 3 and 5 can be good. And actually, researchers at oh goodness, what was the university? Tulane University. Researchers at Tulane University found that you can nearly quadruple the likelihood of a buying decision in the moment if you offer more than one choice, if you offer 2 or 3 choices. Because what happens is the question goes from do I or do I not want this product or service to which of these do I want? And 3 is a nice number because very often we go for that center option. So if you only had the basic and the deluxe, you'd probably sell more of the basics. But if you have the basic deluxe and the super deluxe, you may not sell a lot of the super deluxe. You might not even sell any, but you'll sell a lot more of the deluxe, that middle option. So I'm a big fan of 3. Sometimes, I go up to 5, but I don't want to go beyond that because again, people start to just get that analysis paralysis, that choice overload.
That makes a ton of sense. There's so much, Nancy, about the book that we could talk about. I want to ask you. Thanks for the advanced copy, by the way. How long did it take to write? And there are many marketers. Everyone really wants to write the great American novel, but what advice would you give to aspiring writers or someone who's now that you've gone through this process that is thinking about writing a book?
Yeah, well, it was really something I got to say, and I want to thank Kogan Page, my publisher, for giving me the opportunity. It's funny you talk about writing the great American novel, and it just made me think of something. This book is not the great American novel. It is a very practical, tactical, kind of hands-on handbook for marketers. I've done all the research. I've curated the case studies. I've tested these principles. I've stayed on top of what the behavioral scientists are doing, so that you don't have to. As a marketer, you got a lot going on. As a business person, as an entrepreneur, or even someone in a large Fortune 500, you got a lot of things going on. You don't have time to do all of this. This book is like a quick handbook for you. It will tell you exactly, the hacks you need, the tactics you need, the techniques you need to follow. Very easy, practical examples. I was, I think, given the contract last summer. Getting back to how long it took me to write, so I started writing it last summer. They told me I should do a chapter a week. And I said, is that common for somebody who has a full-time job? And they're like, oh, yes. They reassured me it was. Fortunately, we were in the middle of, COVID, last year, and it was a little bit slower, but there were a lot of long nights and weekends at the typewriter, at the keyboard, on my MacBook Pro here. But I wrote it over the summer. It was due at the end of the year, I think, and then by I think January of this year, we were into edits and proofreading and things like that. Getting the manuscript ready. So it was a jam-packed several months, and it got me to 17 chapters of some of my best stuff for marketers.
Very, very cool. I understand that if I were in the UK, and I'm not, I'm here in Seattle, I could buy the book now. If for those listening who are in the States or elsewhere, when can they buy the book? What's the title, and how does one pre-order it?
Okay, so the title is very simple. It's called Using Behavioral Science in Marketing. So that's what we're talking about. That's what the title is. The editor said to me in his very British way, we find that it benefits to say what's on the tin. so so you want to know about behavioral science and marketing? Get, using behavioral science and marketing. And yes, it was released in the UK earlier this month. It will be out at the end of this month here in North America, but pre-orders are apparently, and I'm a new author, so I don't know, but pre-orders are apparently really, really important for authors. So don't wait until the end of the month. Pre-order it now. They'll send it out at the end of the month. It debuted as the #1 new release on Amazon for business marketing. And I just checked this morning; it's still there, so it's holding steady. But absolutely, order now. You'll be among the first to get it in the States when it comes out. It's in Kindle and it's in paperback and it's also in hardcover. But I'm told that that's really more for libraries than anything else. Everyone's reading paperback or on Kindle these days.
Right on.
But you can get it on Amazon. Absolutely get it on Amazon. It's also available. It will also be available at Barnes and Noble and Target and any place where you buy your books. Kogan Page also has a website that offers it. But if you're interested, please check it out and let me know what you think.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Good luck with the book and the release, and great to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it.